That line sounds like the opening to a bad novel. But when it's your life, it doesn't sound poetic. It sounds like a door closing, quietly but permanently. The day I found out, the rain had been falling since dawn. I remember because I'd left the kitchen window open a little too long, and the smell of wet earth crept inside. I was stirring lentils on the stove when the phone on the counter buzzed. A notification from the bank. Transaction of $1,850 at Maple Suites Apartments. It caught my attention because we didn't live anywhere near Maple Suites. And Mark, my husband, was supposed to be in another city that weekend for work. At first, I thought maybe he'd book something for a client. Mark was in property development. He often arranged rentals for visiting investors. Logical. Innocent. Easy to explain. Still, that notification wouldn't leave my mind. It clung to me the way a wet shirt sticks to skin. When Mark came home 3 days later, everything looked ordinary. He walked in with that casual tiredness men wear after travel. Rolled sleeves, phone in one hand, suitcase in the other. "Miss me?" he smiled, dropping a quick kiss on my forehead. "Always," I said. It was true then. I didn't suspect anything concrete yet. Just a whisper that something had shifted. But that night when he slept, I noticed something small. His wedding ring, always on his left hand, was missing. "Forgot to put it back on after the shower," he murmured the next morning when I asked. It was nothing again. Always nothing. Mark and I had been married for 12 years. I'd built my world around small, steady things. His coffee exactly 2 sugars, our Sunday breakfast ritual, the way he hummed while brushing his teeth. Those things anchor you. You stop checking for cracks because the routine looks whole. We met in our late 20s. He was confident, charming in that quiet, self-assured way that makes you believe he's safe. I was working in HR. He came in to handle a construction firm's contract. He offered to carry my files to the car, and that's how it started. A romance that felt mature, grounded. Our early years were simple. Tiny apartment, shared dreams, laughter that came easily. When he was promoted, we moved to a bigger house on the edge of town. We even talked about adopting, though work always came first for him. Some people describe betrayal as an explosion, but it doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it seeps in like smoke, slow, invisible, suffocating. Started with small changes. Mark's travel increased. He began dressing differently, subtle upgrades. New cufflinks, a more polished haircut. A scent I hadn't seen him buy. I told myself he was leveling up at work. Men go through phases of wanting to feel young. I thought. I wanted to be supportive, not suspicious. Then one evening I found a second phone charger in his briefcase. I remember holding it in my hand, staring at the unfamiliar brand name. When I asked about it, he said, "Oh, one of the interns must have borrowed my bag by mistake." The explanation was so quick it almost felt rehearsed. Later that night, while doing laundry, I found a crumpled receipt in his jacket pocket. A restaurant bill. For 2. Dinner, Maple Bistro. Maple again. My chest tightened. I folded the paper carefully, placed it on the counter, and stared at it like it might change if I looked long enough. When he came home, I said nothing. Not because I believed him, but because I wasn't ready for what might happen if I didn't. The moment of clarity came weeks later. I'd gone to his office to drop off a file he'd forgotten. The receptionist looked confused when I told her I was his wife. "Oh," she said. "His wife usually picks him up from here after 5. Her wife." I froze. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" The girl turned pale. I must have misunderstood. He mentioned a Mrs. Collins once. I assumed. Collins. My surname. But also his. The words hung between us like smoke. I drove home in silence. Every traffic light felt too long, every second too loud. That evening, I didn't wait for him to come home. I drove to Maple Suites. Unit 3B. His card had been charged there again 2 days prior. The receptionist didn't ask many questions. She just glanced at me, then at the name on the system, and handed me a visitor's pass. The elevator was slow. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. When the door opened, I almost turned back. But curiosity and pain share the same heartbeat. They both drive you forward when you should stop. I knocked once. A woman answered. Mid-30s, long hair, wearing one of his shirts. "Yes?" she asked, polite but wary. My voice sounded detached, almost calm. "Is Mark here?" Her expression flickered. confusion, then recognition. He just stepped out, she said, eyes darting. Behind her, the apartment was unmistakably his taste, minimal neutral tones, the same brand of whiskey he kept at home. On the table, a photo frame. Mark smiling, his arm around her. A ring on his hand, identical to mine. I didn't cry then. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked away. Back in the car, I sat for a long time, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield. My husband had 2 lives, one with me, one with her. And both of us had believed we were the only one. That night, I didn't confront him. I waited. I needed to see what kind of man could live such a lie so calmly. So I planned. When he came home 2 days later, smiling, humming, smelling faintly of her perfume, I asked him to sit. Mark, I said quietly, do you love me? He looked startled. Of course I do. What kind of question? Enough to tell me the truth? His eyes narrowed slightly. You're tired, babe. You've been overthinking again. Let's. Maple Sweets. Unit 3B. The color drained from his face. He didn't deny it immediately, and that silence was enough. Who is she? I asked. He rubbed his face. It's complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my voice steady. You have another apartment, another life, Mark. What's complicated about that? He looked away. She doesn't know about you either. I laughed. A hollow sound. So we're both living in your lie. Mark moved out the next morning. Not because I threw him out, but because men like him prefer to escape before the mess reaches them. They want to leave before the silence starts echoing. He packed with efficiency. Shirts, laptop, razor. The routine of someone who's done it before. He didn't look ashamed. Just tired. When the door shut, I stood still. The sound of his car engine faded, but something inside me didn't. That kind of betrayal doesn't leave cleanly. It stains everything it touches. For 3 days I said nothing to anyone. I cooked. I worked. I folded laundry that wasn't his anymore. Then I called the woman. Her voice was calm, softer than I expected. I was expecting your call, she said. So she knew. He told you about me? I asked. Not at first. He said you were his ex-wife. That you still called sometimes. I let that sit for a second. And you believed him. I wanted to. That line stayed with me longer than anything Mark ever said. I wanted to. I met her a week later. Same cafe where Mark used to take me for breakfast. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She was trembling slightly when she arrived. No jewelry, no defensive smile. Just a woman who'd realized her version of love was built on someone else's lie. I didn't know about you, she said again. I swear. I believe you, I said. He was good at pretending. She exhaled. Relief and shame mixed together. He said you'd left him years ago. He told me he was always traveling for work. Silence. The clean kind, truthful, heavy, necessary. She reached into her bag, pulled out a photo. Mark and her. At the same lake where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. Same spot. Same smile. Same words written on the back in his handwriting. Forever starts here. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just emptiness, the kind that comes after the fire burns out. I'm pregnant, she said finally. That's why I wanted to talk. I looked at her, then at the window behind her, where rain began to fall again, just like the day I'd found out. That child, I said slowly, deserves one honest parent. Her eyes filled with tears. He said he'd fix everything. That he just needed time. He won't, I said. He doesn't fix. He duplicates. When she left, I stayed for another hour watching strangers walk past outside. Each one carrying their own version of betrayal, probably quieter, maybe smaller but real. That night Mark called. I didn't answer. He left a message. You'll always be my real home. I just got lost. Lost. That's what liars say when they're caught holding 2 maps and still pretending there's only one road. 2 months later, the divorce papers were signed. Clean, unremarkable signatures on dull paper. He tried to meet once more. I declined. Last week I passed Maple Sweets. Her car was parked there. His too. I didn't stop. You don't return to the fire after you've learned what burns. The world calls women like me victims. They're wrong. We're witnesses. of how deception builds empires, and how silence demolishes them without lifting a hand. 3 months passed. Enough time for people to stop asking how I was and start assuming I'd moved on. They were wrong. Healing isn't progress, it's maintenance. You just learn to walk around the ruins. Then one morning a letter came. Handwritten, not printed. No name on the envelope. I recognized the slant of the handwriting before I opened it. Mark, I'm at the hospital. It's bad. Please come. No explanations. No apologies. Just that. For a long time I stared at it, thinking how sickness makes even the guilty sound human again. Eventually I went. Not for him, for myself. I needed to see the ending with my own eyes. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and decay. He looked smaller. The kind of small that isn't physical, it's the collapse of pride. Tubes, wires, the usual machinery that keeps unfinished lives running. He opened his eyes slowly. You came. I did. You still hate me? No. You're not worth that much energy. He tried to smile. The kind of half-smile men use when they think charm still works. It didn't. I ruined everything, he said. You did. She left too, he added after a pause. Took the baby. Said she couldn't raise him around lies. Silence stretched between us. Machines beeped. He looked away first. I didn't come for closure, I said. You don't deserve that word. Then why? To confirm the story ends here. He closed his eyes again. You were always stronger. No. Just more honest. I left before the nurse returned. Didn't look back. The door closed and the hallway felt lighter. 2 days later the hospital called. He was gone. No funeral, no message, no family. Just an empty record. I went once more, not to the grave but to the house we'd shared. The for sale sign was still standing. I walked through the empty rooms. My footsteps echoed where his excuses used to live. In the bedroom closet I found one box left behind. Inside, our wedding photo, a tie I'd gifted him, and a note in his handwriting. If you ever read this, know that I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how. That line almost sounded sincere. Almost. I burned the note in the sink. Watched the paper curl and turn to ash. When it was done, I washed the ashes down the drain. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. They end when you stop remembering the sound of the liar's voice. I didn't speak about Mark again. Not to friends, not to anyone. But grief has a strange persistence. It doesn't disappear, it mutates. Some nights I wake up thinking I heard his keys in the door. My mind still replayed that sound like muscle memory of betrayal. But something unexpected happened after he was gone. People started calling me brave. As if surviving deceit is an achievement. It isn't. It's a scar you just learn to decorate. I sold the house. Moved into a smaller apartment on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, a narrow balcony. A view of the streetlight instead of the sunset. It was enough. I didn't need more space, just fewer ghosts. My days became quiet. I started volunteering at the community center. Mostly helping women who'd been through something similar. Cheating, financial betrayal, hidden lives. Every story felt like an echo of my own, told in a different accent. One woman, Maria, told me her husband had pretended to be a contractor when he was actually unemployed. He'd been living off her savings for 2 years. She cried while talking and I just listened. That's when I realized something. Silence is the purest empathy. You don't have to say, I understand. Just existing beside another broken person is enough proof that healing is possible. Weeks later, I received an email from someone named Elise. No subject line. Just a message that read, You don't know me, but I knew Mark too. I found your address among his things. I thought you should know he talked about you. A lot. He said you were the only one who ever made him want to be better. I sat there for a while reading it over and over. For the first time I didn't feel anger. Just distance. Like I was observing a character in someone else's tragedy. That night, I visited the lake where Mark and I used to walk in the early days. The water was still glass-like. The wind carried the scent of pine and rain. I stood there and whispered something I hadn't said out loud before. You didn't win. You just left early. A man passing by stopped briefly. Maybe thinking I was talking to myself. I didn't care. Healing, I learned, isn't a grand transformation. It's the absence of reaction. The day you stop needing to explain your pain to anyone. That's the day it starts dissolving. And slowly the world became ordinary again. I started cooking for one without sadness. I started walking without rehearsing old conversations. I started existing without the prefix of broken. It wasn't forgiveness. It was release. It's strange how the smallest things remind you of who you used to be. The first rain after a dry spell. A song you haven't heard in years. The taste of coffee you once shared with someone now erased. One morning while cleaning out my drawers I found the second ring. The one he'd hidden from me. I had kept it without realizing. Buried under old receipts and expired warranties. Simple band. No engraving. No story left. I turned it over in my hand for a long time. Once that ring had meant betrayal. Now it was just metal. Weightless. Meaningless. I placed it on the windowsill and left it there, letting the morning sun warm its surface. A week later I gave it to a charity shop. The clerk asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It's not mine anymore." That evening I stood in front of the mirror. For years I'd looked into it and seen a woman who'd failed. Failed to notice, failed to protect, failed to escape sooner. But that night I didn't see failure. I saw survival. The lines near my eyes had deepened. My hair carried a streak of silver that hadn't been there before. But there was a calmness too. A quiet that only arrives when nothing else can shake you. I looked at my reflection and said quietly, "You were never weak. You were just loyal to the wrong story." That sentence stayed with me. It became my truth. Months later Maria, the woman from the center, invited me to speak at a support event. "Just tell your story," she said. "People need to hear it." I hesitated. For years I'd kept everything contained, locked inside where no one could question it. But something in me shifted. Maybe silence had served its purpose. Maybe the story wasn't a wound anymore. It was a warning. That night I stood on a small stage in front of 30 strangers. My palms trembled. I took a deep breath and began. I once thought love meant never doubting someone. Then I learned, real love starts when you stop lying to yourself. The room went quiet. Every face was still. Some cried. Some just listened. For the first time I felt free. Speaking wasn't reopening the wound. It was letting the air finally reach it. Afterwards, a young woman approached me. "You made me realize I'm not crazy," she said. "He's been living another life too." I placed my hand on hers and said, "You already know what you need to do." That night I walked home lighter. Not happy, not sad, just complete. A year passed before I visited the city again. The same one where Mark's second apartment once stood. Curiosity, not nostalgia, brought me there. I needed to see the space where his double life had lived and ended. The building looked the same, gray stone, polished lobby, cold lighting. But the nameplates had changed. New tenants. New lies maybe. Life keeps recycling its characters. The receptionist didn't recognize me, which was a relief. I stood across the street for a long moment, watching people come and go. It struck me that no one knew what had happened behind those walls. Secrets don't stain concrete. They vanish into the paint. I walked away. I didn't need to see the inside. Closure wasn't a location, it was the moment you stopped looking for it. Back home I found the courage to start something new. I began writing. Not diaries, not confessions, just fragments of thought. I called it the Book of Truths I Owe Myself. Each page carried a sentence that had cost me something to learn. Love isn't proof of goodness. Silence is not peace. You can forgive someone and still walk away. Healing doesn't erase the story. It rewrites the ending. Over time I realized I didn't hate him anymore. Hatred keeps you tethered. I wanted distance, not vengeance. The past was heavy, and I was tired of dragging it. One evening Maria visited me. She brought coffee and a letter from one of the women who'd attended the event months ago. The letter read, "I left him. I didn't cry this time. I just packed my bag and walked out. Thank you for reminding me that staying silent isn't strength." I folded the letter and smiled. That was it, the circle closing. My pain had turned into someone else's map. Later that night I sat on the balcony. The streetlight buzzed faintly, and the city hummed below. For the first time I felt no weight pressing down. Just the quiet rhythm of a life that had finally returned to its own pulse. I whispered into the darkness, You had two lives, Mark. But I only needed one, the one that finally belonged to me. And in that stillness, something inside me settled. Not joy, not relief. Just truth. Sometimes the person you trust most builds an entire world behind your back. And when that world collapses, you're left standing in the ruins, wondering if love was ever real. But maybe that's where truth begins. Not in what we lose, but in what we learn to live without. If my story reminded you of something you felt, or something you've survived, I want you to know this. You're not foolish for believing, you're brave for facing the truth. Would you have done what I did? Or would you have walked away sooner? Tell me in the comments, I read every one. Your words help others see they're not alone. If you felt this story, please like the video so more people find it, subscribe for more true life stories like this, and share it with someone who might need the strength to start over.